Welcome everyone to the Revenue Subcommittee meeting for March 25th, 2021. Apologies that we had to delay the start of the meeting for a little bit. We had members in bill hearings on the other side of the street. As you know, the schedule gets a little wonky during the post-crossover period. So we have 4 bills which I wanted to make sure that we had ample time to discuss. They're all departmental bills. They all relate to tax credits. We heard I believe 3 of them today. I think we have 1 more that we're going to discuss today in concept that won't be heard until April 1st. So that'll be our April Fool's hearing, but it's still a very serious bill and not a joke at all. So those 4 bills, as you'll recall, are SB 19, which makes alterations to the Biotech Investment Tax Credit, or BITC. Senate Bill 19, Senate Bill 160, which makes changes to the Cybersecurity Investment Tax Credit and makes it an Innovation Investment Tax Credit. SB 186, which has to do with the Job Creation Tax Credit and a credit for hiring veterans. And SB 196, which has to do with the Research and Development Tax Credit. A number of these credits, you'll recall, are credits that we discussed in committee last year. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for a second for the purposes of discussion. I charted out some of the similarities and differences between the changes that we had proposed and passed out of the House in House Bill 565 last year and the proposals that have come from the department this year. And so we can walk through the bills, answer any questions that members have. If members would like amendments drafted for discussion at a meeting where we consider final passage out of the subcommittee for these bills, then we can start requesting those now. And we can start with the R&D tax credit. As you will recall, last year's HB 565 made a number of changes to the research and development tax credit. One of them largely technical in its definition of net book assets. That same definition is included in this year's departmental bill. The HB 565 of last year also proposed the elimination of the basic credit. So you recall that there's actually 2 types of research and development credits in Maryland. One of them is the basic credit, which essentially incents existing research and development spending. The other one is growth credit, which incents new research and development spending. DLS has recommended or brought up a number of times over the years that we should probably be more focused on the growth credit, that really what we want to do is grow research and development spending in the state. So last year's bill, as well as the departmental bill, would eliminate the basic credit and put more money into the growth credit. Those numbers are a little bit different because in last year's bill, there's a total of, George, correct me if I'm wrong, but $12 million of spending between the 2 parts of the R&D credit.
Correct.
Yeah. So last year's bill would have decreased that to $9 million. The departmental bill keeps it at $12 million. Both bills had a 30% small business set aside. Because of the differences in the size of the pie, that means that it's actually $3.5 million going into the small business set aside under the departmental bill, which is more than what was in last year's bill. And in addition, there's a per company cap in both bills, last year's bill and the departmental. Last year's bill set that cap at $450,000. The departmental sets it at $250,000. And Madam Secretary, Rhonda, anyone else from Commerce who wants to weigh in, is there anything else significant in the bill that you would like to make sure that we're aware of?
This is Rhonda. There's a sunset extension like we were before you guys 2 years ago.
Right.
And you told us to come back and try again. So as you can see, we made significant changes, but we also need to extend the sunset.
Correct, yes, thank you. Any questions on the R&D tax credit proposal from members of the committee, suggestions, ideas for amendments, etc.? I see Delegate Ivey and then Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you don't mind, was there a rationale behind last year's bill moving the number down to $9 million total from the $12 million?
So last year's bill was part of a conversation about how to, part of the conversation was about saving money, frankly, on these credits and reducing the amount of money we were putting in business tax credits. You know, that provision of last year's bill was controversial. So, you know, and I think the department would like to see the funding stay at 12 million.
Thank you.
Delegate Palakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in looking back through the 2018 DLS review of this tax credit, I think the bill before us makes a number of changes that were recommended by DLS, but there were 3 things that stuck out to me that aren't included in the departmental bill. I think 2 are slightly more minor points. One is a meatier piece. So I think the most substantive one is that the way that this tax credit defines small business isn't consistent with other programs and is somewhat unique. I don't remember exactly what DLS went into in terms of how this definition is different, but the fact that it's using like a dollar figure as opposed to years in existence or number of employees is in general how the definition of small business for the purpose of this tax credit differs from other programs. And so DLS's recommendation had been to make this more in line with other programs. I'd still like to go that direction if that's possible. The other 2 recommendations that stuck out to me from DLS that are not included in this bill would be one, to have some sort of statement of legislative intent. It appears that some of the other departmental bills before us, Commerce has added some language. I think on the biotech tax credit, they actually have a new like purpose statement for kind of what the goal is for the program, but this one still does not. And then finally, DLS had recommended for Commerce to do reporting on the number of women and minority-owned businesses that were recipients for the tax credit. So those were my 3 suggestions on this one.
My understanding, so we passed legislation last year to require MBE reporting on a range of credits. And Rhonda, that covered this credit, right?
I think it did. I've got to go back and look at it. I know that we've begun to augment our applications to ask the question, to gather the information. And when it's an individual, we can get that. When it's a corporation, you can't really get identifying racial information, but we have begun asking the question.
So it's self-reporting.
Yes.
And then do you all have any thoughts on the other 2 issues that Delegate Palakovich-Carr just raised about the definition of small businesses and the inclusion of an intent statement?
Hi, this is Lonnie.
I think Lonnie might. Sorry, Lonnie.
Sorry, Secretary. We did bat the idea of doing a more radical change as far as the definition of a small business. All of our prior analysis was performed using the historic data of what is a small business. It's the way that it was drafted, I believe, since 2013, defines small business as a company having net book value assets at the beginning or end of the year of 5 million or less. And so largely our reframing of this statute was based off of, again, historic data using that same definition. Certainly we could review in subsequent years a possible different change. I know that all of our other tax credits focus on small business as 50 employees or less. That's what it traditionally used in other tax credit programs. I'm not entirely sure of the legislative history that caused this one to be based on revenue, but that is worth looking into.
I think if I'm remembering correctly, one of the things brought up by the Tech Council last year in these discussions was that many of these high-tech businesses have small workforces compared to other types of businesses. They may have been bringing that up in the context of the biotech credit, but I don't know. Delegate Feldmark?
And there certainly is, Delegate, a very wide variety of businesses that do apply for all of our tax credits. And the concept of the definition of small business in general, having coming from ECM and the Department of Labor, there is no consistent messaging when it comes to small business size standards, right? So the state of Maryland has extremely different size standards than the SBA has. And there's certain programs that have different size standards, but I think it's based on, you know, the industry needs. And the R&D tax credit is a little bit different than the biotax credit, and, you know, wanting to, you know, get to different demographics. But I also, because this is for the company, not for the investor, right? And so we want to keep that in mind, the differences between the two credits. But I just wanted to draw about those differences. And when it comes to MBE, I just want to make this as an overarching statement, because we had a lot of conversation with the Relief Act and when we were distributing funds through CARES Act and different types of programs over the course of the past year. We can ask for identifying information for demographics, but we can't demand it. So although, as Rhonda stated, you know, we're putting that question on our applications, there's nothing saying that they have to fill that out, and there's nothing that's saying that they have to qualify. And there's different classifications for small and disadvantaged businesses and women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. And we collect as much as we can, and of course we're happy to report on all of that because we have been doing a lot of reporting already with our different grant programs. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that there's no way that we can, like, they have to fill out that portion. And so I just wanted to make that clarification.
And George, on that topic, George messaged me to confirm that last year's bill would apply in terms of the MBE reporting to the extent the data can be collected to the job creation tax credit, R&D, biotech investment, and cyber investment. Delegate Feldmar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering on this question of definition of small business, if we could get some real data on you know, the companies participating in the program and sort of see how those different characteristics line up, right? So if they're qualifying here as a small business based on value, can we get the data on number of employees and just to see how they compare?
Do we have that data in Commerce, or is that a comparison that would take a while?
Yeah, I guess that's part of my question.
Mm-hmm. I know we're post crossover, so I know it's short, Lonnie. I know it's short turnaround. But
We have some data of, I believe, state versus worldwide number of employees that we could possibly provide. But it may take some time to collect. Is there a particular number of years you'd like the data for, or 1 year, maybe?
I mean, as much as is reasonable or manageable, you know, I just thought it might be helpful as we're talking about these different ways of defining it, if we could see how that lines up in terms of, you know, actual data for companies involved in the program.
Yes, and I will say that there is crossover between, say, bio and R&D. A lot of our bio companies that's in BITC also apply. So they meet, of course, the definition of small business, both in the head count as well as in the revenue count. We'll see what we'll be able to gather for you shortly.
thank you very much, Lonnie. You're fantastic. We appreciate you. Are there other questions on the R&D credit? So Delegate Block-Rich-Carr, you had mentioned the intent statement. Do you want to work on trying to draft some language for an intent statement?
Sure, happy to.
Okay. And then we'll see what we learn from any data Commerce is able to get together on the small business side. I do want to, and we'll get as much done over the next week and a half as we can. I say week and a half because I want to make sure we leave time for these bills to get fully back across the Senate and confirmed. So, there may be stuff like the small business issue. If the data collection takes a while, it may be a next year issue, but But we'll see what we can get done over the next week and a half. On the biotech investment tax credit, so the department's proposing a number of changes. They were described in the hearing today. The comparison here just shows some of the differences between last year's bill and what the department's proposing this year. Last year, we'd included in HB 565 a total lifetime cap on tax credits for investors in any given business of $6 million. The number is $7 million in the departmental bill. The annual cap we had proposed at 15%. The department comes in below that at 10%. That's the annual per company cap and the percentage of the credit that can go to an individual, to investors in an individual company. Commerce included an intent statement in their departmental bill. We did not have one in last year's bill. That's certainly fantastic. As described in the hearing today, there are changes to the credit values, and I think the secretary spoke to why they were proposing those changes. And I believe these numbers are correct. It would reduce the basic credit from 50 to 33% of the investment, and the enhanced credit from 75 to 50%. And then also make some changes to the company age out from the program, which, and I don't know if I'm characterizing this correctly, Madam Secretary, Rhonda, Lonnie, it would basically confirm that 12 years was the extent to which a company could continue to participate in this program. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So, questions, clarifications on the biotech investment credit bill? Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
It's not a question, it's a suggestion. So I'll defer to my colleagues if anybody has questions first.
You were the only one with your hand up, so.
All right. Okay, so again, looking through the DLS review from 2018, actually starting with one that's not from the DLS review. So this appears to be one of the few tax credits where there's a departmental bill this year where there's still no sunset date on it. The other tax credits that are before us have historically had sunset dates, and some of them include extensions, but this one doesn't have a sunset date. And so just pointing that out in the hopes that the subcommittee continues our new practice in this session, adding sunset dates to tax credits as they come through the subcommittee. Okay.
That a sunset had been proposed on this a number of years ago, and as you might expect, got significant opposition from industry, who made the predictability argument about having a sunset. I think there was a sunset proposed to it as part of the Tax Credit Evaluation Act, I think, when it originally passed in 2011 or 2012, whenever that was, but it was stripped from the bill by the committee.
All right, I'll just point out that the cybersecurity investment tax credit does have a sunset date. So
I'm not arguing against your, I'm just giving you
know.
background. So
I'm sure. Thank you. The second area, I've raised this during the hearing. I mean, DLS had talked about making this a competitive award, recognizing time constraints in the midst of session. I don't think we can direct changes in terms of how the awards are made, but I would like at a minimum for us to bring back the reporting language that was in the chair's bill from last year. Oops, I'm sorry. To basically require Commerce to look into how they could go to competitive awards and to come back to us with, their thoughts on that. Mm-hmm. Another suggestion from DLS was to restrict company insiders from getting the tax credit. So people who are employees in the company right now technically could qualify to get the tax credit. I don't think that's our intention. This is to be outside investments. So if we can add some kind of restriction to that extent. DLS also had a few questions around directing more of the money to earlier stage companies. And I think there was a couple of ways to get at this. I'm still not sure if all of them would be needed, but either having a set aside of a portion of the money for early stage companies, or you could change the amount of, decrease the amount of the tax credit for more established companies. But if the thought here is, again, to try to be incentivizing and rewarding earlier stage companies who often have more restricted access to capital, I think adopting one of those approaches, again, I don't necessarily think it needs to be both, could be useful. And then just my last thought, and this is maybe a question for George. The Opportunity Zone Enhancement Bill that we passed in the 2019 session, I think included enhancements on the biotech and maybe some of these other tax credits. Given that this bill proposes to decrease the credit amounts, I haven't had a chance to look back. Was that bill tied directly to what this is, or is that something else we might have to address in future legislation?
I think you need to probably address that separately. There's a
Right.
separate title, or sorry, subtitle in economic development article that concerns those enhanced credits. And so you would probably need to have amendments
Okay.
drawn to that accordingly.
All right, thank you for that. Flag that for myself for next year. Sorry, that was like a long list of things, Mr. Chair.
No, I mean, that's why we're having this meeting. So, I mean, just my 2 cents on that issue of early stage companies. I mean, in the Rise Zone bill, we sort of did a flexible set aside where we said a certain portion of the funds from, in that case, it was the rental assistance, the leasing assistance money would go to, earlier stage or smaller businesses, and then unspent money would revert back to the general thing. I don't know if Commerce has any thoughts on any of the issues that Delegate Polakovich-Carr just raised.
Delegate, and respectfully to the entire subcommittee here, I'm very respectful of going back in time and looking at the DLS, the analysts, and everything that they had proposed for the program. However, I would like to say that there was significant work that was put into this, working with all of our stakeholders, all of our partners, our internal analysts, our data, with members of the legislature, in order to be able to come up with some terms that we think will very clearly expand the equitable distribution of the tax credits, as well as different types of businesses to get involved with these tax credits. I think this is a great first step. As you can see, we've gone to extra lengths, even from the bills that were passed last year by this committee. And we've gone a little bit further, understanding that we could, depending on the types of businesses that were there. And so this is a really good faith effort, and there could be some small changes moving forward, but I think that we really need to provide some certainty to this industry specifically, considering that there's such a high profile on this industry right now, and Maryland is really at a pinnacle point in order to be able to capitalize on a lot more investment coming into the state. Oddly enough, because of the pandemic and because there's such a highlight on our businesses and what they've been able to do. So the attraction of those smaller companies and those investors is going to really be a key for us moving forward with economic development in general for much of the state.
I appreciate that. And I nothing in any of our discussions should be taken in any way as a criticism of the department. I think the department's done a great job in producing these bills. I do, I think, and I know this is outside of the department's control, but it would be helpful in future if we had departmental bills considered in the House as well, or, first, given that we deep in the weeds on some of these bills.
Welcome to my world. I wish that were the case too, Delegate Lutke. Yes, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I'll pass that on to my friend Kiefer Mitchell, but keep bugging me. Are there further questions, comments, or thoughts from other members of the subcommittee on this? Okay. The final two bills for discussion are the changes to the cyber investment, the job creation tax credits. As was heard in the committee today, the cyber investment bill essentially re-envisions the program. As you'll recall, one of the criticisms of that program has been that its focus on cybersecurity to the exclusion of other innovative industries limits the flexibility of the department in trying to drive investment towards emerging sectors of the economy. And so the core of the cyber bill is essentially to turn it into an innovation investment credit, which could be refocused on new high-tech industries as those industries start developing. And I think the example was given today of quantum computing, which is a very much a growing field in Maryland and around the country. Madam Secretary, anyone else from the department, anything else you wanted to mention on that bill?
I think we're good with that. I think this goes along with a lot of the conversation that we've had in both the House and the Senate over the past couple of years.
Any questions or comments on that bill from members of the committee? And Delegate Polakovich-Gar.
All right. Following up on the question I had asked during the hearing, and I did not ask it very articulately. So about the issue of how the sectors get selected. Again, I think the idea of going from cybersecurity to just technology companies, that totally makes sense to me. But I had a couple minutes just to look into what the Maryland Economic Development Commission, the work that they do. And I trust that the secretary and her associates from Congress know a lot more about that entity than I do, but I still feel fairly uncomfortable about just picking certain sectors of the technology industry. If the point is to be incentivizing companies that are based here in Maryland to grow, a company could be at the forefront of something that hasn't emerged as an area of interest yet, or bubbled up to awareness for that commission could be aware of it, but could be a very good pick in terms of putting money from this tax credit into it. And I could also see other scenarios where again, there might not be a whole industry or field that's developed, but there could be a company or more that's based in Maryland that could be a good fit otherwise for this tax credit. I guess I feel like this should be a little broader than it is. I mean, especially since this has been a tax credit that has been underutilized in past years. To not have that.
You're asking why the focus on sectors instead of just broadening it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go back to where we were in our conversation at the bill hearing, and it's typical for the Maryland Economic Development Commission to look at sectors in general. So utilizing that as a strategic focus in order to be able to direct us into certain strategic areas in our key industries, that's what the Department of Commerce is charged with, and they do develop those key industries. They're on their website. They're all listed in our latest strategic plan if you're interested. But I think it's a good way to really kind of have a clean focus. But if that's certainly not the will of the committee, then we're certainly welcome to look at different types of opportunities.
I mean, my take on it, Delegate Polakovich-Gar, I understand where you're coming from. I do think that for some of our economic development programs to be effective, they have to be targeted in some way, right? I worry a little bit about being so scattershot that we're not building the sort of communities of innovation. I mean, one of the things we've seen in biotech is the ability of folks to seed new companies, right? To come out of a company and seed a new one. And we've got this sort of community of innovation around biotech. So I get the argument from the department as well. I don't know if that.
So, I mean, I understand that, but I guess I look at biotech different than for technology companies because biotech does involve a lot of need for physical facilities, labs, specialized equipment, et cetera. Technology companies don't necessarily need that. I mean, you can have people who are founding a technology company out of their home with just their laptop. I mean, they don't need specialized equipment in that regard. I guess as I think holistically about the new direction that this departmental bill goes in, I would rather leave it a little more open, but have it be more focused on actual very early stage companies, have some smaller limit on number of employees, years in operation, et cetera, than what's currently allowed under existing statute, but just leave it wider open in terms of the fields within technology that businesses could come out of. And I realize that's kind of a different direction.
Yeah, Delegate, I just want to clarify too. So we talked about aerospace, and aerospace is a company that does not fall really under anything except for our R&D tax credit right now. And these are for investors. And there are, when you think about aerospace, certainly those technologies that have to be done with a larger number of people and that probably can't be done from a home environment. I'm not really debating the issue with you, so I don't want to appear that way, but I want to just, there is such a wide range of them that we want to make sure that we have some type of a focus on where we're heading as well. But I also want to, just because the idea of TEDCO had come up during the hearing, seed investments are done by TEDCO. They have the Builder Fund, they have the Seed Fund, they have the Maryland Venture Fund, and TEDCO's job is to invest into those early stage companies, into them directly as an investor. The Department of Commerce, our job, our mission in this related effort is to be able to, as an economic development tool, attract investors into the state. So there's a little bit of a difference in the mission of what we're doing with two different types of scenarios. And when we talk about an investor credit, we want to be able to make sure that what we're providing for that venture capital investment group out there is something that's going to be attractive, so we can continue to get them to invest in companies that are coming out of TEDCO or coming out of the university system or some of the incubators across the state, so that those businesses stay in the Maryland arena to do their expanded business growth here. And so it's more about the growth of the business than it is necessarily the initial startup of the business. Does that make sense?
It does, and I guess that's where
talking in circles.
No, that makes sense. I guess that's where I'm getting a little bit of a mixed message from the existing statutory language that's retained here, because it talks about the business needs to have an aggregate capitalization of at least 100,000. I mean, that you're talking about a business that's just gotten out of the friends and family round. But on the other hand, that has fewer than 50 employees. I mean, that's a pretty mature technology company that has, you know, when you're talking about has 30, 40, 45 employees in it. So, I guess, and it's not clear to me, right, exactly what stage company we're going for. And I would agree, like, you're not going to get investors in on somebody where it's, you know, them and their co-founders. But if somebody who is at the level of raising a seed round, I think would be a good fit for potentially for this tax credit. And that's where I do worry about constraining the industries. But I mean, I guess maybe a more general point is this is another tax credit that does not have legislative intent language that could help us, you know, to evaluate in which direction some of these other points should be going in, if we have a better sense of exactly who this program is meant to be a good fit for. And that's not to the secretary, that's just in general for the group. She's welcome to comment, of course.
As a former member of the House, the secretary gets to comment anytime she likes in subcommittee. So.
You're very kind, but on this one, I know when to just allow the delegate to have the last word.
All right. The final bill that was on the list for subcommittee today is a departmental proposal related to the job creation tax credit and a credit for hiring veterans. And I'm actually going to ask the department to sort of offer a brief description of the bill for us, if that's okay.
Sure. So we have our very popular program, the JCTC, the Job Creation Tax Credit Bill. And we also are looking to incorporate our Veteran Tax Credit Employment Fund. And I may have misstated what that actually is, but you understand the point. So the Veteran Tax Credit for hiring purposes has been extremely underutilized. And it's very difficult, I think, for small businesses and businesses in general. If they're going to be applying for any types of tax credits, they're not going to be doing it to get up to $1,800 for a veteran. It's just not worth their time and effort. It doesn't mean that they're not hiring veterans, but it means that they're not taking advantage of the program necessarily. So they're not being incentivized to necessarily hire veterans, which was, I believe, the intent of the legislature a few years ago. It was 2017 when the bill was passed. So in order to be able to give a broader kind of one-stop shop for those people that are looking for the different tax credits in the state, and for us to be competitive with these types of businesses to grow, expand, attract, incorporating that veterans tax credit into an existing tax credit application to us seems like it would be the best way to be able to incentivize the hiring of veterans overall, and to give it a higher level of transparency for the businesses to know that it's there and that it can be utilized and that there is a benefit for them in those hiring of veterans. And I will ask Rhonda if I left anything out with that description.
I think you covered it. Lonnie, did the secretary miss anything?
Was the sunset discussed?
Oh my goodness, the sunset.
And the sunset also?
Yep.
All right. Madam Secretary, that's dangerous to ask people that work for you if you got anything wrong. You never know what answer you're going to get on that kind of question.
I do that all the time, and they're pretty honest with me.
Hey, that's a sign of good staff. They're willing to. All right, questions from members of the committee about this? Delegate Feldmark, you had your hand up and then it came down.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm enjoying the lovely spring air, but there was some traffic noise. So my question is around who can still qualify for this. So by putting the tax credit for hiring veterans and shifting it to the job creation tax credit, is that, I just wonder if we're narrowing the universe of employers who can qualify, because maybe I misunderstood, but I thought with the existing program, any business or any position could qualify, right? It didn't have to be a new position, whereas job creation tax credit focuses on new positions. And so I'm just wondering if we're losing some opportunities in that transition, but I may be missing a piece.
Delegate Feldmark, you're correct. There is no requirement under the hire now inside JCTC that it be a new position. Again, this is just an incorporation. So hire is existing the way it was, with the exception that now we need them to fill the position for at least 12 months, but there is no requirement for the new hire to be a net new position to the state. So we're keeping intact JCTC the way it is, and then hire the way it is, with just two changes. One, increasing the hire tax credit under JCTC, and then two, requiring that at least the veteran hired had to be at least filled for 12 months.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Other questions from members of the committee? All right. So what I'm going to ask, if possible, is if there are members of the committee who have amendments they want to propose to any of these four bills, that they try to get them into drafting, preferably by close of business Monday or Tuesday. I'd like to bring these bills up again for conversation in our subcommittee meeting, which will likely happen next Thursday after the bill hearing, so that we can get these bills moved out of subcommittee. If you would also share those proposed amendments with the Department of Commerce so they have a chance to look at them, and with me so I have a chance to look at them, that'd be great. And with George, of course, because we need George for everything. Yeah, and then the next time we will be meeting, I believe, George, did we settle on Tuesday? Yeah. So Tuesday we'll be meeting to discuss two duly assigned bills. These are cross files of the two bills that we passed out of the House having to do with the Bureau of Revenue estimates. And because they're duly assigned with appropriations, we need to get them moving pretty quickly so that appropriations can do their piece as well and get them across. But that's all I have for today. Is there anything from any of the members? All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you on the floor tomorrow.
Thank you, delegates. I appreciate your help very much.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Have a good one.